Guys. I am excited about this week's topic of generational diversity. I enjoyed watching Chip's TED Talk. And, at first, when I was watching it, I really was thinking what he is describing kind of sounds like a utopia. As I walk into law firms and I see how their teams interact with each other, I don't often see that trust level in place. I don't often see that intergenerational pipeline that he described, where there is a very comfortable and trusting transfer of information from one way to another. And the more I got to thinking about it and thinking about my own career, I realized that I actually have been in a time when I've been in that mutually beneficial mentorship relationship where there was an intergenerational pipeline of information flowing. My very first job out of college, obviously, I was in my early 20s, and I was hired at a software company, a company that sold software for law firms. And the gentleman who hired me was in his mid 80s. And he started a software company when he was in his late 60s. He was a fascinating individual who really believed in what Chip was talking about of the importance of intergenerational diversity. He talked a lot about how important he thought it was to have friends in every generation. He had grandkids, he had his team of employees that worked for him that he very much tapped into their knowledge. He also had a golf foursome. He was a big golfer, and his golf foursome was really interesting because it was a very intergenerationally diverse, or I should say, a generationally diverse group of people, all people who owned businesses, and they would share information once a week, play golf. And he really got a lot out of that and talked a lot about how people of other generations really helped him learn. And he was quite a mentor for me. He really kicked off my career. I spent almost 17 years with that company and really grew and stretched myself working there. And I owe so much of that to him as my mentor, a gentleman in his 80s who really was open to sharing his wisdom, open to pushing me outside of my comfort zone. And in thinking back to that relationship, it was a very trusting relationship. And I helped him in many ways too, ways that I didn't think about until I watched Chip's TED Talk. I was just out of college. It was when cell phones were sort of just kind of taking off. And he was interested in having me help him navigate his cell phone. He was interested in having me help him navigate our software program. And when new features were released, me help him understand how to use those new features, what they meant, how to describe them to, our clients and people in the industry. So there really was, thinking back on it, this good information pipeline and this good trusting relationship where I was able to benefit from his vast experience in the industry and vast experience with business. And I hope that he was able to benefit from some of what I brought to the table as a young early worker, hopefully with a fresh set of eyes. I know I am all the better for that mentorship relationship in my life. And so thinking back on that, I think if you do have that foundation of trust and you do have that relationship, I think it can absolutely work. And maybe it worked because he was my boss and I was fresh and new. So maybe I was less apt to push back on a relationship like that. But it did work. And it opened my eyes that maybe Chip was right, that everyone can be both an intern and a mentor. And then when I was reading the article, one of the things that stood out to me in the article that I thought was really interesting and that I would really enjoy getting other people's perspectives on is they talked about the differences between blue collar workers and professional workers and how those two sets, regardless of the generation, how those two sets of workers approached work. And it seemed that the blue collar workers, from what I gleaned from the article, expected less out of their employer, didn't have as high of an expectation as the professional workers. And that got me thinking about what Miracle shared last week in class, where she was talking about how we can infuse meaning into our work. And maybe we start with paying people a livable wage. And so thinking about blue collar workers, maybe that's what it boils down to, is that, I need to ensure that my basic needs are met before I start infusing meaning into this, before I start, having these high expectations of the company for whom I work. I grew up in a very blue collar household. My dad was a welder and my mom cleaned houses. And I can attest that they had a very boomer approach to the workforce where it was fierce loyalty to a company and sort of head down. You go into a job and you make sure that, you do what they tell you. And I did not choose a blue collar job. I went into a professional, went to college and went into a professional job. And I did have a much and do have a much higher expectation of my work and the meaning in my work I'm part of Generation X. So I do think that I embody being able to push back against authority or at least question it. I'm wondering about other people's experiences, maybe in their own families, or other friends that they may have who may be in the blue collar profession, and what those differences are in how blue collar workers and professional workers approach things, even across generations. So I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's recordings this week. And thanks so much.